Imagine risking your life for a hospital bill and accidentally getting engaged to the devil. That's Evelyn. She walks into one shift, says one wrong word, and suddenly she's living in a penthouse, sleeping beside a mob boss, and dodging bullets at charity galas. But here's the part that really hurts. The man threatening her freedom is also the only one keeping her alive. And Damien, he starts with a fake fiancé plan, then catches feelings so hard he turns a citywide mafia war into a personal apocalypse. This isn't romance with red flags, this is love built on a loaded gun.
A single slip of the tongue plunged New York's deadliest sanctuary into absolute silence. It was a fatal blunder, a self-signed execution order. Right before his entire syndicate, Evelyn accidentally called Damien Moretti, the undisputed ruler of the East Coast, baby. Usually, a person would drop to their knees, begging for mercy. But Damien was forged from a different iron. He bridged the distance, his expression unreadable and frozen, uttering a demand that fractured her universe. Say it again, slower. Far away from this icy confrontation, the kitchen sweltered in forgotten heat. Let us reveal this girl, walking the edge of the abyss. Her name is Evelyn Vance, suffocating in a scratchy waitress uniform. She does not belong in this underworld. By day, she is a broke university legal student, not some mob server. Desperation brought her here, needing $5,000 for her niece Lily's urgent surgery. This venue, the Obsidian Room, is no ordinary lounge. It is a fortress where kingpins whisper secrets. "Table 4 is dry, get them more cognac," barked her high-strung floor manager, Henderson. Thrusting a tray into her hands, he warned her under his breath to never meet their gaze. To break that bottle would mean her life was worth less than the spill. Evelyn could only nod, her chest vibrating with pure terror. In her ear sat a concealed earpiece, connecting her to her weeping sister at the medical center. Keeping herself muted, she stepped forward. Through the tiny speaker, Sarah wept that she was losing hope as the hospital demanded payment within the next 60 minutes. Heavy smoke from expensive tobacco hung in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of concealed firearms. Men draped in $5,000 suits cast long, imposing shadows. Tucked in the corner sat table number 4, occupied by a man chiseled from cold stone and raw authority, Damien Moretti. His reputation preceded him. To the legitimate world, he was a billionaire investor. To the alleys, he was the Grim Reaper. He locked eyes with a rival from the Russo family. Though Damien appeared relaxed, his hands gripped the table until his knuckles were white as bone. Trembling, Evelyn stepped closer to clear away the used glassware. "Do you honestly believe you can drive me from the docks?" Damien's tone was velvet poison. "I paved those piers." "The world moves on, old friend," Lucas smirked. "Perhaps you are going soft." Suddenly, Sarah's hysteria reached a breaking point in her ear. She was terrified of losing her child. At that moment, Evelyn's defenses shattered. Overlooking the 2 apex predators before her, she unmuted her headset to whisper reassurance, bending directly over Damien's outstretched hand. Simultaneously, Damien crashed his fist onto the wood. The sudden movement made Evelyn flinch, rattling the liquor bottle. Caught in the sudden panic, she breathed into her microphone. "Everything is under control, baby. Just breathe. I will handle it all." The universe halted. At that booth, time stood still. Lucas stared in sheer disbelief, glancing between the waitress and the mob boss. Damien's personal guards froze like stone monuments, their fingers drifting toward concealed holsters. Evelyn stood rooted to the floor, suffocated by her own error, staring directly at Damien as he slowly turned his gaze. His gaze, chilling as a winter gale, locked onto her. He dismissed Lucas and their massive financial dispute entirely. His focus narrowed onto this shaking girl who had just addressed the city's most terrifying patriarch as baby in the middle of a turf war. Damien did not yell, nor did he reach for a weapon. He merely reclined, a slow hunting grin stretching across his features, a glance of deadly fascination. "Pardon me?" he asked in a smooth, menacing purr. Evelyn's veins froze. Desperately, she silenced her microphone, stuttering that she was incredibly sorry and did not intend to speak out of turn. Damien lifted a single finger, cutting off her pleas. Rising to his full height of 6 feet and 3 inches, he trapped her with his sheer presence. He invaded her personal space, carrying the scent of rich cologne and peril. "Apologize for nothing," he whispered, loud enough for the rival crew to hear. "Say it again, slower." Evelyn forgot how to breathe. She was cornered. On her flank, his lieutenant Matthew watched her while other guards blocked any route of escape. "Please, sir, listen to me," Evelyn begged through shaky lips. "It was all a terrible mix-up. I was speaking on a phone call." "A phone call?" Damien leaned back, calculating her worth. He noted the sheer fright in her eyes, yet beneath it lay a quiet resilience. No tears fell. She was calculating her options. This piqued his fascination. He looked over to the bewildered Lucas. "Lucas, get out. Our meeting is finished. If your crew dares to step near the Brooklyn docks again, I will send caskets, not letters." Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but a single glare sent him running in total confusion. Once the chamber was emptied, Damien reclaimed his seat and pointed to the opposite chair. "Sit down." "I cannot," Evelyn answered, white-knuckling her tray. "My supervisor will—" "Your supervisor answers to the proprietor, and the proprietor answers to me. Sit." And so she complied. He poured 2 measures of aged cognac, sliding one in her direction. "You just prevented a massacre, my dear. Lucas assumed I was weak and cornered. But you—" A dry chuckle escaped him. "You convinced him I am so powerful, I let my own woman serve drinks at a summit." "I am nobody's mistress," she replied defiantly. "Furthermore, I must leave. My niece is hospitalized, and that is who is on the line." Damien stopped, his glass hovering. "The child?" "She is 5 years of age and requires surgery." Her eyes grew moist. "I only accepted this shift to cover her deposit. If you intend to take my life, do it swiftly. I have a little girl waiting for me." Damien observed her silently. 20 years of reading people told him this was absolute truth. Looking down at her worn footwear, he dialed a number. "Matthew," he instructed, never breaking eye contact with Evelyn. "Reach out to St. Jude's in Mount Sinai. Find a—" He hesitated, glancing at her. "The family surname." "Vance," she breathed out. "Lily Vance." "Locate the clinic where Lily Vance is being treated. Clear her entire medical balance and upgrade her to a private suite." Evelyn gasped for air. "What? Absolutely not. I cannot accept this. What do you expect in return?" Damien disconnected the line. "The cost is that you are now bound to me and my tabs are never light." "Bound to you?" she repeated. "You claimed I stopped a war." "You also bruised a rival lord's ego. Lucas is tearing your history apart right now. Once he realizes you are just a server, he will use you to hurt me." Damien leaned in, his gaze turning to iron. "You have been dragged into this life, Miss Vance, by choice or by fate." The world tilted around her. "Tell me then, what is it you want?" "I require a distraction," Damien said smoothly. "The Russo clan is growing bold. They view me as isolated, without a legacy, without a spouse, without a vulnerability. They believe they can seize my empire." He tasted his drink. "I must lead them to believe I have found my weakness, A fresh obsession? Someone under my shield? It will cause them to make mistakes, allowing me to crush them. Evelyn recoiled. You want me to pretend to date you? Not date, Damien corrected, standing to adjust his suit. I need a fiancé. The concept was utter madness. You have lost your mind, Evelyn countered, rising to confront him. I am a law scholar with my own future. I refuse to play make-believe for a criminal kingpin. Damien remained entirely unmoved. The medical bill for your niece totaled $80,000. It is handled, he continued. Furthermore, Lucas's hitmen are waiting at the exit. Attempting to leave on your own means you will never reach the train. He extended a massive, weathered hand that brooked no refusal. 6 months, Evelyn. Reside in my estate. Clothe yourself in what I buy. Accompany me to my functions. Play the woman who conquered Damien Moretti. In return, the child receives elite medical treatment, your debts are erased, and you leave with $5 million. Her vision fixated on his palm, the sole lifeline in this chaotic spiral. This was the ultimate bargain with darkness, but the walls were already closing around her. A notification from Sarah revealed that Lily was resting in an executive suite, awaiting her procedure. News that brought both immense relief and heavy obligation. Meeting Damien's icy steel-gray eyes, she understood the bridges were burnt. That single accidental word had sealed her destiny. Placing her hand in his, she tried to draw a line in the sand. 6 months, and if you cross any boundaries without my permission, this contract is over. A subtle, arrogant smirk lifted the corner of his lips as his massive hand enveloped hers. I will never have to force you, Evelyn, he whispered, drawing her inches closer. The journey to his residence was heavy with a suffocating, silent tension. They were seated in the rear of an armored luxury vehicle, a leather partition drawing a physical boundary between them. Beyond the dark windows, the neon blur of the city streaked by, sweeping from the crowded avenues into the shadowed corners of the neighborhood, finally climbing toward the glittering spires of Central Park South. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, a physical manifestation of her psychological unraveling. Not long ago, her biggest concerns were university finals and making rent. Now she was breathing the same air as a man with a classified federal file. Control your trembling, Damien commanded, the blue glow from his digital tablet illuminating his sharp features. Terror has a distinct aroma, Evelyn. In my circles, it only summons the wolves. You do not frighten me, she breathed, the most transparent lie she had ever uttered. With slow, deliberate grace, Damien faced her. He reached out to gently brush a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The warmth of his skin sent a jolt through her freezing body. Excellent, because as of tonight, I am the single shield standing between you and oblivion. It is the rest of humanity you ought to fear. The vehicle glided into a subterranean garage that resembled a high-security vault built of solid concrete and heavy iron gates, flanked by armed security. Welcome to your sanctuary, my beautiful girl, Damien murmured as her door was opened. The penthouse was a glass palace in the heavens, hovering at the peak of the tower. The entire penthouse was an ode to glass, steel, and black marble, a beautiful, frigid space with no more warmth than the man who ruled it. An associate, Matthew, will collect your belongings, Damien stated, his keys clattering on a countertop that cost more than her education. When Evelyn began to protest about her roommates, he cut her off. They believe you've left to study abroad on a surprise scholarship. The university has been informed. You are on an official leave. She whirled to confront him. You tampered with my school records. I bought them a new library, a subtle difference. Damien moved toward the immense window overlooking the park, loosening his tie in the first truly human gesture she had witnessed. We need to establish terms, Evelyn, he said, turning back. First, you do not exit this building unless I or Matthew escort you. Second, you will not answer your phone without my approval of the caller. Third, we occupy the same bedroom. The air left Evelyn's lungs. That was never part of our agreement. I stipulated no physical relations. I agreed not to touch you without consent, Damien corrected, closing in with the predatory grace of a shark. But this place is filled with staff. If they report separate rooms, our story unravels. If the story unravels, Lucas Russo will know it's a fabrication. And if Lucas knows, he will have you eliminated. He halted, his face a mere breath from hers. So, we share a bed. It's a king-sized. He had drawn a line in the sand with his threat, a stark boundary between safety and the grave. His gaze dropped to her lips as he added, and I make no promises to be kind. A frantic pulse hammered in Evelyn's throat. She retorted, Fine, but I'm wearing my most hideous flannel pajamas. A raw, unused laugh rumbled from deep in Damien's chest. We attend a gala tomorrow, the St. Clair Foundation event, the social pinnacle of the year. Every significant player will be there. Politicians, judges, and the patriarchs of the 5 families. Tomorrow, I can't learn to be a gangster's fiancé in 24 hours. You're a law student. You read people for a living. Observe them with the same fire you used when you tried to control me. A flush crept up Evelyn's cheeks. That was not intentional. Wasn't it? Damien challenged. Or did you enjoy the momentary feeling of power? Just then, a stern older woman entered with a garment bag. Signora Ricci, Damien said, his tone respectful. Prepare her. The signora eyed Evelyn with sharp appraisal. Too thin, too American, but there was raw material. She clapped her hands once. Come, Piccolola. If you are to walk with the devil, you must appear a queen. The following 12 hours were a whirlwind of total reinvention. Under the tyrannical eye of Signora Ricci, Evelyn was sculpted, polished, and remade. The woman staring back from the mirror that next evening was a complete stranger. Her gown was a slash of blood-red silk, clinging to her form like a second skin. It was cut daringly low in the back, with a slit that traveled high up her thigh. Old Hollywood waves framed her face, and a diamond necklace felt like a beautiful, heavy collar at her throat. Perfection, a voice resonated from the doorway. Evelyn saw Damien leaning against the frame, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo. He was the picture of sophistication, but the cold glint of a holstered firearm was a grim reminder of his true nature. He crossed the room, his reflection joining hers in the glass. He was the shadow to her flame. One final touch as he murmured, producing a ring from his pocket. It was a platinum band holding a diamond the size of a small rock. He slid it onto her finger, a perfect fit. It belonged to my mother, he said, his voice devoid of any sentiment. Do not lose it. She ended the last person who attempted to take it from her. How reassuring, Evelyn whispered, her gaze fixed on the enormous gem. Damien, what if I fail tonight? You won't. He turned her to face him, his hands resting on her waist. Simply remember this. Tonight, you are mine. You are not a waitress. You are Evelyn Moretti, the intended queen of the Hapo copy. Let them witness your fire. He offered his arm. Shall we go to war, my dear? Evelyn took a steadying breath and accepted his arm. Do not call me my dear. Then make me stop, he smirked, guiding her toward the elevator. The gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Inside, the city's most lethal men, cloaked in designer wear, moved around an ancient temple bathed in golden light. As their limousine arrived, a barrage of camera flashes erupted. The press swarmed, shouting Damien's name, desperate for a photograph of the elusive tycoon and his new companion. Chin up, Damien murmured, his hand a firm weight on her lower back. Look indifferent. It infuriates them. Evelyn raised her chin, adopting the cool, disdainful expression of a high-fashion model. She felt Damien's thumb trace a line against her hip through the silk, a steadying gesture that sent a jolt through her entire body. The air within the museum was thick with the scent of flowers and generational wealth. A string quartet played, their music lost beneath the hum of 100 clandestine negotiations. As they moved through the great hall, the crowd parted for them like a tide. Men offered respectful nods. Women exchanged whispers behind their glasses, their expressions a cocktail of envy and contempt. Moretti, a deep voice called. Damien's frame tensed for an instant before he adopted a relaxed posture. Senator, a pleasure. Senator Reeves, a man Evelyn recognized from his hard-on-crime media appearances, greeted Damien with a warm handshake. And who is this vision? The senator asked as Damien drew her fractionally closer. This is Evelyn, my fiancée. The senator's composure faltered, a flicker of raw disbelief crossing his face. Fiancé? I never saw you as the settling down type, Damien. I assumed your only commitment was to the business. Meeting Evelyn altered my priorities, Damien replied with liquid smoothness. Evelyn extended her hand, offering a polite smile. An honor, Senator. I've been following your zoning reform bill. Clause 14 is a clever maneuver, but I suspect its eminent domain provisions will face significant constitutional challenges. The senator was clearly stunned. Damien looked down at her, a mixture of profound shock and immense pride on his face. The lady is well informed, the senator finally managed. She is singular, Damien corrected, his voice leaving no space for debate. And a law student. As they moved away, Damien leaned close, his voice a low rumble in her ear. Clause 14, wasn't that a touch dramatic? I maintain a perfect 4.0 grade point average, Damien. I am not merely ornamental. Yes, I am beginning to understand that. Well now, what a charming domestic scene. The voice was pure acid, hanging in the air. Evelyn felt Damien's body turn to stone beside her. They turned to see Lucas Russo, martini in hand. At his side, his son, Antonio, a pale imitation of his father, was visually devouring Evelyn. Lucas, Damien acknowledged, his nod a silent declaration of war. In this arena, the battle is fought with social daggers, and Lucas's smirk is the first strike. His words are poison, framing Evelyn as a new possession Damien has polished for display. Inquiring about the dress's price is a veiled question about her own. A price he immediately presumes is low. Damien's flash of fury is a predictable male response to the challenge, but Evelyn silences it. She proves herself not a liability, but an asset. Stepping forward, she seizes control of the narrative with icy calm. Her claim that she made Damien Moretti beg revalues her not in currency, but in a psychological power Lucas cannot fathom. A tense quiet falls, proof her counteroffensive struck its target. Antonia Russo's guttural sound is a testament to the force of her verbal blow. Damien is frozen, save for a minor twitch that betrays the inferno within him. The flush rising in Lucas's face is the classic sign of a narcissist being publicly undone. His retort, a threat cloaked in metaphor, is a feeble attempt to reclaim dominance. At that moment, Damien's veneer of civility cracks, exposing the predator. He makes it clear a public threat to his future wife means all decorum is now void. Invoking the senator's name is a signal he's willing to burn down the entire social order. Lucas's tightened jaw is a strategic retreat, but his final glance at Evelyn is a clear promise of a second round. Damien's criticism of her staggering death wish reveals his own survival code. Maintain absolute control, a code she has just violated. His grip on her is both possessive and protective as he steers her away. Evelyn's attempt to justify her actions falls on deaf ears. In his world, her purpose is not to engage, but to survive under his protection. The whiskey is merely a tool for him to regain his composure. His assessment of Lucas as a cornered reptile is a cold, clinical analysis of his foe, knowing a desperate man is the most dangerous. His constant scanning of exits, hands, and reflections reveals a man living in a state of perpetual paranoia. The demand to dance is not romantic. It is a strategic move to maintain their facade for the unseen observers on the balcony. He guided her onto the dance floor with the tactical precision of a general positioning his queen. As they began to waltz, his hand on her back asserted total command, leading her with a terrible grace. For Evelyn, this simulated intimacy forged a strange, quiet bubble where the harsh reality of their arrangement seemed to dissolve. All that remained was the primal current of their bodies in unison, a cadence both ancient and breathtakingly new. Her remark on his skill was a quiet excavation, searching for the man beneath the monster. His reply, attributing it to his mother's brutal philosophy of power, was a rare fissure in his armor. His gaze then lowered, shifting the atmosphere from public performance to private reckoning. The name she had used, baby, hung between them, a challenge she softly issued once more. His warning, don't, came out strained, a testament to the immense force of his self-control. Her deflection, a mention of her niece, was a textbook exercise in plausible denial. He dismantled her pretense, identifying the true object of her stare, himself. This ignited a moment of profound vulnerability, the air crackling with everything left unsaid. His response, "Perhaps you saw something in me that wasn't a monster," was the central question of his tortured existence, a hope he was almost too afraid to entertain. Her whispered answer, "I haven't decided yet," left him balanced on a knife's edge between the man and the beast. Abruptly, his entire frame went rigid, pure predatory instinct seizing control. His focus narrowed, locking onto a fatal flaw in the tableau. A waiter whose movements radiated deadly intent, his hand obscured by a velvet cloth. The command, "Get down," was not a suggestion. It was a primal roar. His first action was to transform Evelyn from a partner into an object, propelling her out of the line of fire. The silenced reports were a cold, intimate form of violence, their only evidence the splintering of a nearby ice sculpture. The ensuing screams marked the complete disintegration of the evening's civilized illusion. Amid the pandemonium, Evelyn saw Damien was not retreating but advancing, closing the distance to the threat. The assassin's attempt to reacquire his target was futile. Damien's counter was a brutal masterpiece. A wrist shattered with an audible snap, the weapon neutralized. A knee to the abdomen and a throat slammed against marble completed the silent, vicious takedown. His question, "Who sent you?" was a roar that seemed to command the very air in the room. The assassin's desperate reach for a knife was met with overwhelming, definitive force. Damien drew his own weapon but did not fire. He wielded it like a club in an act of raw personal domination. The man collapsed as the room descended into chaos, with security swarming and guests fleeing. Damien's primal fury simply vanished. He scanned the wreckage, his eyes a searchlight seeking a single target. The moment his gaze found Evelyn, huddled amongst the debris, the warrior evaporated, replaced by the naked terror of a man confronting his deepest fear. He holstered his sidearm, the motion a clear signal his priority had shifted from neutralizing a threat to providing aid. He fell to his knees beside her, his frantic search for injury a raw broadcast of his terror. Her trembling reassurance did nothing to soothe him. His entire world contracted to the gash on her arm, his face contorting into something terrifyingly dark. The pocket square became a field dressing, a tiny piece of order amid the chaos. His call for Matthew was the roar of a king summoning his most trusted lieutenant. Matthew's report confirmed a lone shooter and the convenient departure of the Russos. Damien's order to leave was absolute, his authority unquestionable. His command to burn the building was a metaphor for his willingness to obliterate anything that stood in their path. He lifted Evelyn as if she weighed nothing, and she instinctively sought refuge against him, the strange fusion of gunpowder and sandalwood becoming the scent of their new reality. Her whisper, "You saved me," acknowledged the debt now owed. His growled reply, "I protect what's mine," was not comfort but a declaration of ownership, branding Russo's gambit as a fatal miscalculation. As sirens wailed in the distance, Evelyn understood. The charade was over. Their false engagement had been baptized in actual blood. This was now a war, and the most terrifying part was not the peril, but the profound sense of safety she felt in her protector's arms. The safe house was a fortress, a brutalist monument to paranoia perched above a violent sea, its architecture a reflection of Damien's own mind. The 3 hours since the gala had passed in a silent, contemplative void. He had directed her to the master bathroom, a cold expanse of slate and linen with a single unadorned command, "Sit." She obeyed, her body finally succumbing to the delayed shock of the night's events. A tremor began, the physical manifestation of trauma finally asserting its hold. Her gown, once the costume for their shared deception, was now just a tattered record of the evening's violence. Damien began his own ritual, scrubbing the assassin's blood from his hands with a methodical fury as the water ran crimson. His refusal to meet her gaze was a form of self-flagellation. To see her would be to confront the terror he had wrought. He dried his hands, then retrieved a first aid kit. Kneeling before her, he mirrored his posture at the gala, but the context had shifted from a public threat to a private penance, the air between them heavy with a soul-crushing guilt. "Let me see your arm," he said, his voice a low murmur that belied the command. She offered it. The cut was minor, but to him, it was a profound failure of his protection. As he applied the antiseptic, she flinched and he stopped, his body rigid. "My apologies," he breathed, the hands of a killer now trembling with regret. He was not sorry for the sting, but for the entire catastrophic affair. "This was not on you," she murmured, but he refused the comfort. No, this is entirely on me. He continued his work, confessing he had used her as bait in a calculated risk that had backfired spectacularly. He finished, and his eyes, filled with deep remorse, finally met hers. Our agreement is over. Evelyn just stared, utterly bewildered. He then switched to a cold, clinical tone, severing their connection. He detailed her exit strategy: a car, a private flight, a secluded Swiss chalet, a gilded cage designed for her safety. He promised her a new identity, a fresh start, and trust for her niece, but on one condition: they would never meet again. He turned away from her, unable to witness the impact of his own words. He was acting like a man excising a diseased limb, convinced he himself was the poison. But Evelyn's mind was replaying a different scene. The man who had shielded her with his own body, who had moved like a wraith to save her. Any rational person would have taken the ticket to Switzerland without a second thought. It was the logical move, an escape from the madness. But Evelyn Vance was not forged in logic. Her life had been a series of battles. Retreat was not in her nature. She rose, closed the space between them, and laid a hand on his back. He flinched, as if struck by lightning. No, she stated, the single word a declaration of war. He turned, his expression one of pure disbelief. Did you not understand me? They fired at you? But her response was not emotional. It was strategic. She explained that her disappearance would be a victory for Lucas, painting Damien as weak and inviting further aggression, and he will eliminate me regardless, as a loose end. I can protect you better from afar, Damien countered, his anger a thin veil for his fear. And who is protecting you? Evelyn's question landed like a gunshot. The silence that followed was absolute. Damien simply stared, completely disarmed. You have soldiers, Damien. You have an army, but you have no one watching your back. She stepped into his personal space. I am not leaving. The deal stands. 6 months. I honor my commitments. Damien looked down at her, at the unwavering fire in her eyes. He felt a fissure form in the walls he had erected 2 decades prior, on the day he watched his father die. You are a profoundly reckless woman, he murmured, but there was no malice in his tone. And you possess a significant blind spot, she countered. You never even asked if I had eaten. A strange sound, half chuckle, half groan, escaped his lips. He reached up, cupping her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Evelyn, he began, his voice deepening into a low, commanding growl. Stay, and I will burn this world to ash before I allow them to touch you again. Okay, she whispered. He leaned closer, the space between them charged with a palpable current. His lips hovered inches from hers, a final, silent challenge for her to retreat. When she only closed her eyes, he sealed their new pact. This was not a tender kiss, it was a tempest. It tasted of whiskey and desperation. Damien kissed her like a man deprived of oxygen, as if she were his only source of air. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her flush against him. Evelyn circled her arms around his neck, anchoring him to her. For a moment, the world, the syndicate, the war, the blood, ceased to exist. There were only 2 souls who had looked into the abyss and chosen to fight back together. Damien broke away first, breathing heavily, his forehead resting against hers. Go sleep, he ordered, his voice strained. 1 more second and I will break that 6-month rule. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest. A part of her wished he would, but she merely nodded. Good night, Damien. He paused at the door, his palm flat against the wood. Secure this. Only open it for me. 3 weeks passed like a slow bleed. The conflict with the Russos became a silent war of wills, a psychological battle more exhausting than any gunfight. The organization hemorrhaged cash. Shipments were intercepted. Federal agents descended on Damien's operations with surgical precision. They had returned to the city, yet the penthouse had become a gilded cage. Sleep had abandoned Damien. His nights were spent cloistered in the study with his inner circle. Matthew, his lead enforcer, and Victorio, the family's counsel. Evelyn was relegated to the margins, cast in the role of the beautiful, traumatized fiancée. Yet being sidelined was a role Evelyn refused to play. As Damien convened his councils of war, she launched a silent counteroffensive from the library. She was not perusing fiction, she was mining Damien's encrypted corporate records. And she had unearthed an anomaly. It was a Tuesday. A tempest assaulted New York, rain battering the windows. The atmosphere in the penthouse was suffocating. "We lost another shipment in Jersey," Matthew stated, his voice hushed. He stalked the study, scotch in his glass. The feds were expecting it. They had the precise container number, Damien, the precise one. Damien just sat on the sofa, his gaze lost in the cold hearth, utterly depleted. That number was known to only 3 men: myself, you, and Victorio. Victorio, a polished man in his 50s with a silver mane and a suit that cost a fortune, dismissed it with a wave. And the Port Authority director. The Russos have influenced Damien. They could have paid him. "That director has been on my payroll for a decade," Damien countered. "He's aware I'd flay him for less." "Then the traitor is in this house," Matthew growled, his hand drifting to his weapon. "We need to conduct a sweep, bottom to top. The rat isn't at the bottom." The voice floated down from the spiral staircase. All 3 men pivoted. Evelyn stood there. She was dressed in a large shirt of Damien's, glasses on, holding a thick sheaf of papers. "Evelyn, go to your room," Damien ordered, his voice sharp as steel. "This is not your concern." "You are losing because you seek a soldier," Evelyn declared, descending the stairs. She was unmoved by the lethal glare in Damien's eyes. She marched to the coffee table and set the papers down with a resounding smack. "You ought to be seeking a bookkeeper." Victorio chuckled with condescension. "My dear, perhaps you should amuse yourself with Damien's wealth. Leave the important matters to the men." Evelyn leveled a stare at Victorio, usually reserved for fools. "I am a paralegal, Victorio. I specialize in corporate fraud, and to be frank, your shell companies are laughably inept." The room fell into a heavy silence. Damien sat up straight, his focus now absolute. "Explain." Evelyn laid out the documents. "I was bored, so I began examining the acquisition records for our warehouse properties, focusing in the shell company for the Jersey Depot. It's registered in the Caymans as Moretti Holdings. It appears legitimate," she explained, indicating a highlighted passage. "However, its annual registration fees are not paid from the main account. They are routed through a different limited liability company, Janus Global." "So what?" Matthew interrupted, clearly baffled. "So," Evelyn pressed on, gaining momentum, "I delved into Janus Global. It's a phantom firm, but the Internet Protocol address on its electronic tax returns originates from a property in Scarsdale." She slowly turned her head to face Victorio. "Victorio, you have a country house in Scarsdale, correct?" The color fled from Victorio's face. He shot up from his seat. "This is absurd. She has illegally accessed our private records, Damien. She is a security threat." She's not wrong, Damien said softly. His eyes were fixed on Victoria, completely ignoring the papers. The internet protocol address. Is that your name on the registration? Damien, I worked for your father. I have devoted my entire life to you. Victoria faltered, stepping back. The container number, Evelyn cut in, her voice like ice. It was listed on the official manifest for the insurance claim. Victoria is in charge of insurance. Damien got to his feet. The predator had reawakened in the room. He stalked toward the man who had been like an uncle to him. Why? Damien asked, his tone a low rumble. Victoria was backed against the wall, trembling. Russo! He provided me with an escape plan. Immunity. So you see, Victoria was making his case, shouting that the feds were closing their net and he had to make a deal. He refused to die in a cell. For that, you betrayed me? Damien's voice was utterly cold. You betrayed my men. You betrayed her. She is nothing, Victoria spat, gesturing at Evelyn as if she were insignificant. Some waitress, a diversion. You're becoming sentimental, Damien. She has made you vulnerable. Victoria's hand began to slide into his jacket. Don't, Damien warned, his voice soft. But the fool was already drawing his pistol. Before he could raise it, a single thunderous gunshot exploded in the penthouse. Victoria fell to his knees in utter disbelief before collapsing face first onto the plush rug. Evelyn cried out, clapping her hands over her ears. Damien hadn't flinched, his arm steady, a tendril of smoke rising from his silver firearm. He acted without a shred of hesitation. He was perfectly still. Matthew's voice broke the ringing silence. Threat is neutralized, boss. But Damien's aim remained true, his eyes still fastened on the traitor's form. At last he turned to Evelyn. She was quaking, staring at the body. He holstered his gun and moved toward her, expecting her to shy away. He had just killed a man in their home. Evelyn, he began, his voice calm. She looked at him, pale but serene. Her gaze traveled from the corpse to his face. He intended to shoot you, she said, her voice completely flat. Yes. That means you had no other option. A ragged breath escaped Damien. He pulled her into a crushing hug, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of vanilla and the night's rain. She represented the one untainted element in his sullied existence. You exposed the mole, he murmured into her hair. You rescued us. Again. I told you, she breathed against his shirt, her hands gripping the material. I am more than just an attractive face. He pulled back, his face a turbulent storm of awe and raw, primal need. The rush from the confrontation and the sharp relief of survival was a potent mix inside him. Matthew, Damien yelled, his focus never leaving Evelyn. Have this place sanitized, rally the men. We now possess Russo's complete strategy. Tonight this war concludes. Understood, boss, Matthew responded, already moving the body. Damien clasped Evelyn's hand. Come with me. He guided her past the safe room and directly into their bedroom. He forced the door closed, and the lock resounded loudly. A gale howled outside, but the tempest within them was 1,000-fold more powerful. You just saw me end a man's life, Damien said, trapping her against the door. And you did not flee. I am finished with fleeing, Evelyn gasped. She reached up, her fingers clumsily finding his collar. Her hands quaked, but not from terror. A low growl rumbled from deep within Damien's chest. He brought his mouth down on hers in a kiss that was a conquest. He hoisted her up, her legs encircling his waist, and crossed to the bed. Say it, he demanded against her neck as they collapsed onto the mattress. Say what? She whispered. He leaned back, his eyes boring into hers. Say the name I call you, he insisted. The one that makes you mine. Evelyn threaded her fingers through his dark hair, pulling his entire being down to hers. Baby, she whispered. In that moment, Damien Moretti, the feared sovereign of New York, was utterly undone. The war for his territory was not won with gunfire, but with a word spoken barely above a breath. The Janus Global documents Evelyn uncovered were more than just proof of a betrayal. They were the full architecture of Lucas Russo's illicit operations, detailing corrupt accounts, paid-off officials, and the precise coordinates of his compound at the Catskills. Damien did not dispatch an army. He went himself with Matthew and a small 4-man team, and he took Evelyn to the edge of the inferno, compelling her to watch. Within an armored vehicle, she witnessed the entire operation unfold on a tactical display, like a remote deity observing heat signatures consuming the property. In that moment, she understood the brutal precision of the Moretti organization, a 20-minute symphony of methodical annihilation. Then, a voice crackled on the radio. Compound secured. Bring her forward. The SUV ascended the snowy drive to the main house. When Evelyn emerged, the air struck her, a clean sting of pine and spent gunpowder. At the entrance, Matthew stood, securing his firearm. He is waiting in the study, he informed her. Damien requires you to see the end, to be certain it is truly done. Evelyn stepped into the study, where a fireplace cast a warm light that felt entirely out of place amid the recent violence. In the room's center, on his knees, was Lucas Russo, defeated but conscious. Damien stood above him, leisurely swirling a glass of Russo's own scotch. His gaze shifted to Evelyn, and the Don's impenetrable mask broke for an instant, a flash of tenderness he showed to her alone. Evelyn, Damien's voice was emotionless. Come here. She joined him at his side, his presence a silent shield. Damien then returned his focus to his conquered rival. You remember Evelyn, I assume? The waitress you claimed was worth less than the fabric of her dress. Lucas coughed a spray of crimson onto the priceless rug. To hell with you, Moretti! This is meaningless. The commission is aware you plundered their retirement funds, Damien interjected. Evelyn uncovered the transactions. You've been draining your own kin, Lucas. No one is coming to save you. You stand utterly alone. Russo's gaze shot to Evelyn, a raw, primal fear finally surfacing in his eyes. The woman discovered it. The Queen discovered it, Damien corrected, kneeling to meet the man's gaze. You are left with one choice, Lucas, a generous one. Sign away your holdings and vanish, or, Damien gestured with his glass, we can conclude what began at the gala. Lucas's gaze darted from the pistol on the desk to Damien, finally settling on the documents Matthew presented. His hand quivered as he signed away his entire existence. Damien rose. A wise decision. Matthew, escort him from my sight. If he remains in this city past dawn, he becomes a specter. As Russo was dragged off, the crushing weight in the room simply evaporated. The conflict was finished. The Russo legacy was ash. The Moretti Empire stood without peer. Yet a single contract remained open. 2 days on, the 6-month agreement expired. The penthouse was still as the rain began to cleanse the city. Evelyn was filling a travel bag. She ignored the couture gowns and gems from Damien, instead choosing relics from her past life. Denim, pullovers, and scuffed footwear. The sound of the main door shattered the quiet. Damien entered, a large envelope clutched in his hand. He froze. his eyes fixed on the suitcase, a nerve jumping in his jaw. "You are leaving," he stated, the words devoid of any question. "It has been 6 months, Damien," she answered, her gaze fixed on a shirt she folded with trembling hands. "Our arrangement is complete. You have won. You are no longer in danger." Damien drew nearer, setting the envelope on the bed. "Your compensation, $5 million, tax-free, sent to a Swiss account, along with the title for a flat in Paris. It is fully appointed." Evelyn looked at the envelope. It was the sum of all her former desires: liberty, security for her niece, an entirely new existence. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice a fragile thread of sound. "You honored your promise," Damien said, his tone utterly hollow. "The defenses are back in place. You served as an effective diversion." "Was that the only thing I was?" Evelyn asked, her eyes at last locking with his. Damien turned from her, moving toward the window. "It was the role you accepted. That is not my question." Damien's knuckles whitened as he gripped the ledge. "Evelyn, just depart. Take your payment and go. This life is not meant for you. You witnessed what I did to Victoria, to Lucas. I am a murderer. The mark on my soul will never fade." "I am aware," Evelyn retorted. She moved to stand directly behind him. "But you never commanded me to stay. You never coerced me into finding those documents. I made that choice. You chose to stay alive." Damien whirled on her, his eyes incandescent. "But you no longer have to merely survive. You have the chance to truly live. Go find a respectable lawyer or a physician, a man who arrives home at 5 p.m. and has no need to inspect his car for explosives." "I have no desire for a respectable lawyer," Evelyn said, tears finally gathering. "I desire you." "Why?" Damien's voice fractured with untamed agony. "Why would you select a life of perpetually looking over your shoulder?" "Because when I do," Evelyn's voice broke, "you are the one I see standing there. Because you shielded my niece and demanded nothing in return. Because you regard me as your counterpart, not as property. Because I love you, you fool." The ensuing silence was crushing, punctuated only by rain striking the window pane. Damien could only stare, his breathing labored. The most formidable man in New York appeared utterly dismantled by a woman in a simple sweater. "You love me," he breathed, as if the words were alien to his tongue. "Yes." Evelyn drew closer, resting her hands on his chest, feeling the frantic rhythm of his heart. "I love the monster, and I love the man. I love how you observe me when you believe I am unaware." From her pocket, she produced the ring, his mother's, the one she had removed for packing. Evelyn pressed the ring into his palm, a silent, unyielding challenge. "If you truly wish me to leave, Damien, then speak the words. Tell me this was nothing more than a transaction." Damien's gaze shifted from the ring to her face, and his entire hardened facade simply crumbled. He cast the ring aside, pulling her into a fierce, claiming embrace. He lifted her from her feet in a dominant display that instantly dissolved into sheer desperation as he buried his face in her neck. "I cannot," he choked out, his voice raw. "I cannot release you. You are the only thing that is real, my one light." He lowered her, but kept her face framed, his eyes locked with hers. "But if you remain," he cautioned, his tone becoming deadly. The entire Paris contingency plan was now a fantasy. His promise was one of complete obsession. "You belong to me until I cease to breathe, and I will set this world ablaze for you each day." And in a stark display of trauma bonding, Evelyn simply smiled at her captor. "Who requires Paris, she whispered. My place is here. Damien retrieved the ring. His hands, which were unwavering with the weapon, now trembled as he slid it onto her finger. Then stay, he commanded softly. Marry me. Become this city's queen. She looked at her new gilded chain, then to the madman who was her haven. Yes, she consented. And with that, Damien's Messiah complex rebooted, now inextricably linked to his obsession. He drew her close, his mouth a breath away from hers. A wise choice, he murmured. Now come to me. Evelyn gave a soft laugh, her arms encircling his neck. Say it once more, she challenged. His kiss was their new contract, signed and sealed. I love you, he whispered against her lips. Is that clear enough for you? The union of Damien Moretti and Evelyn Vance was no quiet ceremony. It was the social spectacle of the decade. They wed at St. Patrick's Cathedral, before the eyes of the entire city. It was a proclamation. The king had claimed his queen, and the Moretti dynasty was now inviolable. Evelyn completed her law degree with highest honors and promptly dismissed the world of corporate law. She assumed the role of lead counsel for Moretti's legitimate enterprises, effectively transforming the entire organization into an impenetrable legal fortress. She was the velvet glove concealing Damien's iron fist. Years passed. They are in a dimly lit, exclusive club where the bass vibrates through your bones. From their strategic position at Table 4, New York's ruling couple watched over their domain. A young waiter, trembling, places a drink near Damien. The glass tips, its contents spilling across Damien's sleeve. The boy went rigid, snared in the abrupt, chilling silence. Damien merely observed the stain, his gaze slowly traveling up to meet the waiter's. His expression was absolute frost. But before he could speak, Evelyn touched his arm, leaning in to murmur something meant only for him. Damien's entire demeanor shifted. A slow grin formed as he looked from his wife to the petrified boy. Accidents occur, Damien declared, his voice level. Correct this, and bring my wife another glass of champagne. The waiter vanished in a blur, the relief so palpable you could nearly taste it. You are growing soft in your later years, Evelyn teased. Damien leaned back, drawing her chair nearer. I am not soft. I merely yield to the true authority. Evelyn's laugh echoed through the club, the sound of a woman who had faced the devil and made him hers. She was no longer the server admitting to an error. She was the woman capable of calming the beast with a single glance. This is the tale of how a single, colossal failure elevated a server to the Mafia's highest echelon. It shows that your most significant mistake can become your most celebrated triumph, and that even the most fearsome monsters possess a mortal vulnerability. I trust you found this journey into Damien and Evelyn's dark world compelling. If their volatile connection and the ever-present shadow of danger captivated you, please hit that like button. It is vital for this channel's existence. Subscribe and activate the bell to ensure you do not miss our next deep dive.
Life lesson. The cruelest tragedies are not the ones where one person loses. They are the ones where everyone gets what they wanted and still bleeds for it. Here's the part that hurts the most, and no, it is not the bullets, the ambush, the mob politics, or the guy getting dropped in the living room. Those are loud pains. Loud pains are easy. The real pain in this kind of story is quieter. It is the moment a person realizes the enemy is not only outside the door, the enemy is inside the pattern, inside the way both hearts have learned to survive, inside the exact thing they mistake for love because it arrived wearing protection, intensity, and sacrifice. He wanted control, she wanted security, he wanted loyalty, she wanted someone who could actually act when life cornered her. On paper, it looks perfect. Two broken needs locking into place like a key in a wound. That is why viewers lean in. That is why this kind of story destroys retention in the best way, because the audience knows deep down this is not a fairy tale, this is a collision. A stunning, addictive, emotionally expensive collision. The irony is vicious. The man who can have anything cannot buy peace. The woman with no power becomes the one person who can destabilize his entire inner empire just by existing. He can win wars, silence rivals, crush traitors, and move millions across borders. But the second he starts caring, every weakness he mocked in other people suddenly moves into his own chest rent-free. And she enters this world thinking the worst thing that can happen is death. Turns out, no. The worst thing is attachment. The worst thing is finding safety in the arms of someone whose existence guarantees danger. That is the first life lesson. People think pain comes from losing what they love. Sometimes pain comes from finally finding it in the wrong universe. Now pause there, because this is where fate gets mean. The story does not give either of them clean morality. He protects, yes, but he also traps. She resists, yes, but she also stays. He is not just the shield, he is part of the storm. She is not just the innocent, she becomes good at surviving inside the storm. That complexity is why the story works. Real emotional damage never happens in neat categories. Most people are not ruined by obvious villains. They are ruined by people who truly care, but whose love comes mixed with fear, power, ego, and unhealed trauma. And that is what makes betrayal hit harder than any gunshot in stories like this, not because betrayal is unexpected, but because it confirms the ugliest truth. A rotten system always eventually reaches for the people who tried to believe in it. The trusted advisor, the loyal insider, the carefully built empire, all of it cracks. Why? Because systems built on fear can produce obedience, but they cannot produce innocence. Sooner or later, everybody starts calculating exit routes. The woman becomes the emotional knife of the story because she sees what the king cannot. Men raised in war often think bigger weapons solve bigger problems. She sees the paperwork, the money trail, the pattern under the pattern. That is the second lesson. Emotion and intelligence are not opposites. In fact, some of the strongest people in any room are the ones who feel deeply and still think clearly. She cries, panics, loves, hesitates, and still outreads the board. That is power, not coldness, precision. And then comes the nastiest emotional twist of all. After all the blood, all the deals, all the protection, all the warfare, the final test is not whether they can defeat the enemy. It is whether they can tell the truth. That is always the hardest fight. Revenge is easy compared with honesty. Pulling a trigger is easy compared with saying "stay." Building a criminal empire is easy compared with admitting "without her, none of this means anything." People laugh at that, but it is true. Plenty of strong people can dominate a room. Very few can confess need without feeling humiliated by it. He wants to push her away because he thinks love plus corruption equals contamination. She wants him to stop hiding behind the monster speech because she has already seen the worst parts and made her choice anyway. This is where the story stops being a mafia fantasy and becomes a life lesson with teeth. Healing does not begin when danger ends. Healing begins when excuses end, not when the city is safe, not when the rival is gone, when the masks are gone. Still, the ending is not clean. It should not be. That is the whole point. A person does not walk through violence and emerge as a pastel version of themselves. They emerge altered, better in some ways, harder in others, more awake, more haunted. That is why the final image matters so much. Not because power wins, but because tenderness survives in a room where tenderness should have died years ago. And maybe that is the final knife twist. He was feared by the city, but changed by a whisper. She was nearly crushed by circumstance, but ended up becoming the emotional center of an empire. One careless word started the whole avalanche, but it was not really the word that changed everything. It was what happened after. He listened. She stayed. Both paid for it. Both were remade by it. So the ultimate lesson is brutal and beautiful at the same time. Life does not always reward the good. It often rewards the willing. The ones willing to face the truth, carry the consequence, and love without pretending love is safe. In the end, both of them win the war and lose their innocence. And honestly, that is why the story hurts enough to matter.